Hey guys, Jeff, Naturally Caffeinated here. Welcome back. Today we're going to be working on the 2017 Beta XTrainer. We're going to pull that swing arm off and inspect those bearings. If they don't look so hot like the last set of bearings I pulled out of that linkage, I got over here a set of All Balls Racing swing arm bearings. And to get those out and to put them back in, I picked up a Motion Pro swing arm bearing tool. So we'll see how that goes. And before we get started, what do you guys think of that logo? That Naturally Caffeinated logo is looking really nice in the YouTube studio out here in the garage. So, okay, let's get started. Okay, to get started pulling the swing arm off the bike, you're gonna need to do a few things. One is you're gonna need to remove the plastics on the frame on both sides of the bike. And what that will do is expose the swing arm nut and bolt. You're gonna need to remove the rear wheel, of course, and the chain. And then you're going to need to pull the brake caliper and brake caliper support off the swing arm, and it just slides right off. And then what you should do there is suspend the brake caliper from the muffler so that there isn't any pressure or any weight on the brake line, therefore preventing any kind of damage. And by the way, the brake line's held in by these two plastic clips, one right here and then one up by the frame. Okay, once you get that done and out of the way, you're going to need to detach the linkage from the swing arm. There's a 13mm bolt and a 17mm nut on the other side. You can do it with one, but I suggest removing the two here. I would leave the rear shock bolt in place, and you can get away with taking out these other two, and then it'll just push out of the way. All right, once that's done, then you can access the swing arm bolt and nut and just get those things removed. And then before you pull the swing arm out, don't forget to get this mud flap out of the way so you don't damage that when you're pulling the swing arm out. And then that should get you started. Okay, when taking the chain off, you just need to get the master link off, and a good pair of pliers will get you there. So on this point here, this is the open end of this clip here. We just need to squeeze the end of that and against this post here. And should come right off. Okay. Now we're going to need to pop the front plate off, and then we can pull this master link out completely. I think that'd be pretty easy, but all right, here we go. All right, that's off. Now we can just push the rest of it out, and then we can pull the chain off. All right, with a 13mm and a 10mm, we're gonna loosen the adjusting nut and screw. And one thing to note is once we get the swing arm out, I will grease these bolts so that we don't have that problem of those rusting and locking in there and then breaking off in the future. So I'll point that out towards the end of the build. Okay, now we've got both of the adjusting bolts and counter nuts loose on both sides of the rim. We'll get this axle nut off. Okay, we'll remove the axle. Set that aside. And the wheel can come out. Okay, for the brake line, we'll just pop these out of these little holders on the rear and the front of it. And we can grab the brake caliper and There we go, it just slides off the back there. Okay, we gotta remove the plastics now. So these are held on just by zip ties, so we'll get these snipped off here. Looks like we have to get rid of this 8mm bolt here. All right, and that should get that off of there. Here we go. Okay, now we got to get the linkage apart. So it's a 13mm bolt on this side and a 17mm nut on the other side. Okay, all that's left now is the 2 3/4 inch nuts on both sides of the swing arm. So we'll get that pulled apart. Looks like that came off pretty easy. I don't know what the torque setting is on it, but I'll mention that towards the end. Okay, there's that side. There we go. All right, here we go. Okay, the axle that goes through that suspension is a little dry. All right, so as I mentioned before, you got to slide this brake caliper off. And what I want to do real quick is I want to take a zip tie, and I'm going to suspend this. I ended up having to grab a couple extra zip ties because to get around this muffler, it's quite wide. So get this suspended here. Nothing super tight, just enough to get it out of the way. Okay, now that that's out of the way, we can pull the swing arm. Just a little left to right movement, and out it goes. Okay, to get started, we're gonna pull out the seals and spacers and stuff. I am going to apply a little bit of heat, so some subframes or swing arms, will have the plastic plugs, the water drain plugs. Make sure you remove any plastic from the swing arm so that when you do apply heat, it doesn't melt any of the plastic. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna get these spacers out. There we go. There's a spacer here, or I should say an end cap here, and then a spacer here. So I'm gonna set that aside. And then on the other side, there's another spacer there. All right. Go ahead and grab you probably want to pick up a sealer puller because these things tend to be a little tight. And if they don't come out, then you're definitely going to need to apply some heat. So I'm going to try and get these out. There we go, that one came out okay. Now, the next step is to observe where the spacer, or I should say where the bearing lies in relation to how they sit inside the swing arm. And these look like they're flush mounted, okay. Because there is a little bit of a gap, I don't know if I can get that in there, but there's a little bit of a gap inside between the two spacers there. And so you just want to be careful and make sure that if you need to, you measure how deep each of the spacers are within the swing arm. And like I said, these look flush. So, okay, we got the swing arm out. It's on the table. Before we get started, there's a couple things to note here. So I'm using the Motion Pro bearing toolkit, And this is going to help remove those bearings and help push them out and then push them back in. Now, the set comes with a few different items here. So these items right here are these bearing pushers, and they come in 3 different sizes. And the box comes with a D, an E, and an F. There's a particular setup that you're supposed to follow. So there is a bearing, and it has to fit a very particular way. So there's a rounded edge on this side. This is going to face out away from the swing arm. Then you're going to put on this big spacer. Then you're going to put on the appropriate driver. In this case is driver F. And then you're going to push that into the swing arm. There we go, and it rests in there beautifully. Then you're going to take your other spacer, you're going to slide it on the inner part of it, and then put the nut on it. Okay, heat's been applied. One thing I want to mention is this swing arm bearing tool from Motion Pro is to put the bearings in, but you can also use it to remove. You'll just need a larger diameter socket on the inside of the swing arm, one that is larger in diameter than the bearing. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is all nice and tight. I'm going to go ahead and start driving these bearings out. Here's one. You can hear it dropping inside the socket. And there's number 2. Perfect. Okay, the old bearings are pressed out. I've cleaned these up. I've greased the insides of the swing arm, both sides. And now we need to pack the bearings with some grease, and I just use this Bel Ray waterproof grease. That should keep the moisture and rust out. And the next thing I'm going to do is just going to heat up the swing arm, and then we'll load the bearings up into the swing arm and press them in with the Motion Pro tool. Okay, the heat's been applied. I've got the bearing in there as straight as I believe I can, and then I've got the tool in there, so I'm going to go ahead and start cranking this down, see if we can get this in. Alright, it's going in. Now I just want this flush. I'm not going to go in too far. So what I'll do is I'll keep driving this down until I'm flush, and then you get the idea, and then I'll just keep working on the second bearing here and then the other 2 here, and then I'll drive the seals down. Okay, swing arm is complete. The bearings are in, seals are on, spacers are in, end caps are in, and now I'm just putting the bike back together. And this is just a reverse process of what I showed you early on in the tear down. So hopefully this was informative. If you have any comments, please leave them below. And again, thanks for watching.